Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Pro Tips. I'm your host, Dave Dahl. Today, we're going to be talking about simple maintenance of the instrument. Things you feel like you know, things you might not actually know. You might learn some things. We're going to be talking about how to keep them clean, how to keep them shiny if they're shiny. We're going to talk about humidity, a whole bunch of other stuff. Here we go. So the first thing we're going to get into is how to clean the guitar. So you just got done playing, say you're in your living room, you just got done playing, but you just want to wipe the thing down. That's pretty simple. You want to get a microfiber cloth, something really soft, something t-shirt material, something like that, and just give it a nice wipe down. Don't have to polish it every time. You don't have to, do anything super crazy. Let's just say, however, maybe it's the summer, you're outside playing at a festival, and now you've got, bug spray and some sunscreen and some of your favorite beer on the guitar. Hopefully not. But if that does happen, you might want to just step it up a little bit. The next easiest thing to do is a damp cloth. Doesn't even have to be soapy, but just a damp cloth to try to get that stuff off. What you shouldn't do is immediately reach for some polish. This finish, the guitar you see in front of me, is full gloss. It is lacquer. Lacquer is porous, so anything that you put on it can get absorbed into the lacquer, okay? So if you use any kind of harsh polish or cleaning product, you actually have the potential to just rub that right into the finish and actually do more harm than good. So that's why I would always recommend just wiping it down with a soft cloth, wiping it down with a damp cloth if you have a little bit more residue on there. If you do want to polish it occasionally, there are safe products in which to do that. So you want to have something that doesn't have any grit in it because you don't want to create swirl marks and scratches and those kinds of things. We do offer products for cleaning a full gloss instrument, which we have here. Again, this is recommended for after you've wiped it down, you've gotten most of the residue off. If there's still some smudges and those kinds of things, you can spray this on the cloth and then wipe it down and then flip the cloth over, wipe it down. Should be clean, should be good to go. If, for instance, you did not have a full gloss instrument like this, if you have a satin, say something from our 15 series, for example, those are still lacquer instruments, so you have to be careful rubbing on those a lot. So if you had a 15 series, say for a number of years, right, you've been playing it for a long time, you may notice in this area where your arm rests, that's starting to get shiny. The more you do rub on that satin lacquer, the shinier it'll get. So if you're constantly rubbing on it with a cloth, obviously you're going to shine it up. We do have special cleaner for specific satin instruments, which we have right here. Basically works in the exact same way. So just to recap here, routine cleaning on the body, wipe it down with a soft cloth. Anything else, you can go damp cloth. If you need to shine it up occasionally, we have products for that. So that's the body. The neck is a little bit different. You still wipe it down. Obviously, your hand is going to get some sweat on here, right? So you definitely want to wipe that down as well. There are ways to condition your fingerboard and condition your bridge, since those are still raw wood. With most of our models, we do oil them at the factory. It's maintenance that also kind of depends on the climate of where you live, how often you need to do that. But maybe once a year or so would probably be a good starting point, right? So there are different products you can use for that. Zymol makes a fantastic specific guitar wax for fingerboard. Smells like chocolate mint ice cream. It's fantastic. Dr. Duck's Axe Wax is another good one. You can even use 3-in-1 oil. If you have a sewing machine at home, you probably have 3-in-1 oil. So you can actually use that, put a little bit of that on a rag and wipe that into the fingerboard and the bridge. Now, none of those three products is going to hurt the finish on the guitar, so those are safe. I'm not saying celebrate it and dump it all over, but if you get a little bit on there, you can take a soft cloth and wipe it off and it won't hurt the finish at all. Some things I would not recommend are lemon oil, anything with a lot of acid in them. Anything silicone based is something you definitely want to keep away from lacquer based instruments. It can potentially burn into the finish. So say, you have your routine maintenance, and at this string change at this part of the year, I'm going to recondition my fingerboard. You can take some really fine steel wool, take that opportunity to clean the fingerboard, whatever goo might be on there from playing. It cleans off the frets as well, and then just hit it with some of that to recondition the fingerboard and the bridge. So the reason you want to do that, again, humidity issues, with there not being any moisture in that, it makes them a lot more susceptible for damage. The last thing you want to do is open your case one day and find a crack. So as far as storing your instrument, obviously I'm going to recommend you keep it in the case. And I know, they're very pretty instruments. You want to have them out on display for everybody to see. You paid a lot of money for these things. I get that. The safest place for these instruments is by far in the case for a number of reasons. Your cat won't knock it over is a big reason. Humidity changes are a bigger reason. The case sort of acts as a buffer to the outside world, okay? So as far as humidity goes, we recommend a humidity range of about 45% to about 55%. That is not to say that if you keep every guitar at 50%, every guitar that you have is going to be perfect, right? Each one of these things is made from a different tree. They all react a little bit differently, right? Just like the doors and windows of your house, right? You have that one window that sticks every summer, right? But the rest of them are fine. They just act a little bit differently. So you kind of have to see how the guitar is talking to you. And there's definitely ways to determine what kinds of attention you need to give it. But as far as case goes, you definitely want to keep it in the case that it came with, if possible. There are a number of different cases. You have molded cases, you have wooden cases, there are gig bags. Each one will kind of react differently with the instrument. A wooden case or a gig bag is obviously going to leave more moisture in and out because wood is porous, right? The molded case is going to keep things kind of protected a little bit better on the inside. So again, as far as monitoring humidity and how you want to do that, it may change the tools that you want to use to get that done. So as I mentioned previously, there are some ways that your guitar talks to you to sort of let you know what's going on with it. So we're here in Pennsylvania. We experience all 4 seasons, some of them a little bit irregularly, but we still experience all 4 seasons. It gets really, really dry here in the winter and really, really humid here in the summer, and the guitars can move a lot. So since, well, let's talk about low humidity first and things that you can kind of look for. Low humidity is a little bit easier to spot. One of the first things that you might notice when you're playing it, the guitar starts buzzing a lot. The strings seem they're a lot lower. They seem like they're a lot lower. The notes just don't come out as clear. The reason that happens is because the top is starting to sink down. It's looking for any amount of moisture that it can possibly get, and everything starts shrinking, right? So everything, this all sort of sinks down, takes the saddle, takes the strings with it, makes it really unclear when you're playing up here. You may also notice if you have a wooden fingerboard that your fret ends get sharp. If you go like this, you can actually feel the fret ends, and you might cut yourself, hopefully not. Again, that's the difference in rate of shrinkage between the wood and the metal of the frets, right? It's another thing to look at. If that's left go, you may open your case one day and find a crack. Usually where those cracks happen are right here along the seam. It's very rare that the seam itself actually opens up. What happens is it finds the path of least resistance. So whatever loose grain, the loosest grain that there is in this area with all of the string tension pulling on it, that's typically where it'll open up, kind of down here. Those are repairable, obviously, but you want to keep these things in the best condition possible. So best to check a lot. You may need to invest in a hygrometer, some other kinds of things. We'll get to those in a second, but before I do, let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about high humidity. Literally the exact opposite happens. You get your guitar out and you're like, man, why is my guitar so hard to play? Action is really high, right? The guitar sounds tubby, heavy. It's because it's taking on a whole lot of water, taking on a whole lot of moisture, just holding on to it. Everything swells up. So again, the best thing, as I mentioned, is to keep the guitars in the case, check them regularly, I understand if you have them outside, you know, in your living room, if you have a fireplace or forced air heat, those kinds of things, it pulls the moisture out of the air. Basically, if you feel it in your head, right, your sinuses are all stuffy and everything, your guitar is probably feeling the same way. So best to check on them a lot. There are several tools to try to regulate the humidity inside your instrument. As I mentioned, I'm going to keep mentioning it. Definitely keep them in the case. And there's no right tool necessarily to do this job. Every guitar is different. If you have something that's made of koa, for example, which is very tropical wood, that's going to take on moisture differently than spruce, right? So if you have a bunch of different instruments in your house, they're going to all need something a little bit different. Even if you had 5D28s, every one of them is going to react a little bit different, right? So we have several products available. We have something like this, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. This is basically just a sponge that lays in between, it attaches in between the strings and it lays on the inside. You definitely do not want these things to be dripping wet. So just run it under some tap water and get them, you know, wet. If it's soft, it's wet, that's fine. Definitely wring out all of the moisture so it's not dripping. What you don't want to have happen is you have something wet laying on the inside of the braces or dripping down on the inside of your guitar, right? Because you definitely don't want to create mold and those kinds of things. This works well. There are some things that you may need a little bit more humidity. One of the drawbacks from this, if it's not necessarily giving you enough humidity, is it's allowing moisture out of the sound hole. So as I mentioned before, if you have a gig bag, if you have a wooden case, that case is going to be trying to get some of that humidity that your body needs. The neck and fingerboard are going to be taking some of that humidity. So there are products that completely cover up the sound hole and just concentrate the moisture on the body itself. In my experience, the body is what reacts to changes the most since it's under so much tension. It's also just made of a bunch of thin pieces of wood. The entire inside is unfinished and raw, so it tends to breathe a lot, right? So again, in my experience, you want to have something that's going to cover the sound hole, keep things out. If you find that everything is fine here, using a product like that, but you're still getting sharp fret ends, not the worst thing to have something like this in the case with it, maybe up by the headstock, maybe in the case pocket, to take care of the case and take care of the neck so those things get the moisture that they need as well. There is a very good chance that where you live and the instrument that you have, it's not going to need any of these things. Believe me, I've seen so many anomalies over the years where I have my grandmother's guitar that's been sitting underneath my bed for 90 years and I've never done anything to it and it's been perfectly fine. Excellent. That is a very rare case. It does happen, but it doesn't surprise me because, again, every one of these things acts differently. They are organic, and you just got to keep up on the care and see what each one of them needs. So earlier in the video, I did mention about string changes when you're going to be cleaning your fingerboard, and hopefully you're changing your strings more than once a year. Depending on how you play, or how often you play, and the amount of oils in your skin, you'd probably want to change the strings maybe every 3 months or so. You definitely want to change the strings before they break. And I know there's a bunch of people that say, I've had the same set of strings on my guitar for 3 years and they're perfectly fine. They sound great. I don't like new strings. They sound too bright. I get it. But you also probably don't know the other effects that those strings are having on your instrument. They're metal, so all the extra tarnish and buildup that's on them, that's also making them sound flat. Flat, ironically, because that extra mass is actually going to affect the tuning and the intonation of your instrument. So it's not going to play in tune with the older strings, first of all. Secondly, it's actually putting more tension on the instrument. So the tighter and tighter that those strings get, the more they're pulling on the instrument. So I recommend changing them, at least every 3 months, if not more than that. So another important factor when storing your instrument, and I am a huge proponent of this, I do it with all of my personal instruments and have for years. If you're going to be storing the guitar for about a week or so at a time without playing it, take the string tension off. You don't need to take the strings completely off, just have them so there's a little bit of slack in them, even if you tune it down a full step or so. That relieves some of that tension that is pulling on this guitar. Part of the reason is it doesn't obviously need that tension while it's in the case, right? The other reason, a week can turn into a month really quickly. We're all busy. Some of us have other guitars that we play. The time can get away from you. If you're not playing it, that also means you're not looking at it. And again, as we mentioned in this video prior, you want to look at your instrument to make sure that it's not going through some of these small humidity changes, especially when they're new, when they're getting acclimated to the environment that they're living in, right? So, say you leave it under string tension, say the thing gets really high humidity. Now all of that string tension is going to pull all of this up, right? And all of that damage is now exacerbated, where you could have prevented having all of this pull up as much as it was if you just have the string tension off. If you're playing it all the time, if you're playing, that doesn't make any sense then. Then you're still looking at it and you're doing all the things we're asking. But again, super important. If you don't play it for about a week or so at a time, just detune those strings a little bit. So guys, quick recap. When you play your guitar, just wipe it down with a soft cloth. If you need to, use a damp cloth, then wipe it down with a soft dry cloth. If you need to polish it, there are products that we have available for that. These can be found online, martinguitar.com, in our 1833 shop as well. Store the guitars in the case. Monitor your humidity. Gave you the tools and tricks to learn things to look for dry, things to look for too much. Keep an eye on them. Take the string tension off if you're storing it for a week or so at a time. Change your strings pretty regularly. Leave your questions and comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Like and subscribe for more videos like this. We'll catch you again soon.